Have you ever stared down at your notes or textbook and wondered, maybe that was just a better way to study than mindlessly reading and copying definitions? If you have, then you are in the right place. Today I want to go over some ways to take effective and useful notes. Notes you actually end up studying and be able to study. And also some extra things that I like to do with my notes. This video is perfect for you if you're looking to start taking notes, or if you're not happy with your current note-taking system, or if you just want to watch this video for interest. So let's get going. For note-taking, I like to use actual pen and paper rather than taking notes digitally. I just find it helps me memorize content I'm learning, but what we're going over today can apply to digital notes as well. Before we go over actual notes, here are two things you need to consider at first. So firstly, have an organization system. You should decide whether you want to use loose leaf paper or notebooks. If you like using binders, then loose leaf is the way to go. And for easy flipping, loose leaf is definitely a go-to there. You should also decide if you want to have the same organization system for all your subjects. For example, you may want to take math notes with loose leaf and biology notes with a notebook because flipping efficiently through math notes is important. Also, look at how you're going to arrange your notes. Are you going to have a notebook for lecture and class notes and another for your notes from the textbook? Or are you going to put them both in the same book? There is no right and wrong, and it comes down to preference here. On the topic of that, the second thing you should not do is make sure you do not use the same notebook for multiple subjects. It may sound like it's efficient and saves space at first, but it's not a good idea. I thought it was a good idea originally, and it was not, so don't make that mistake. In revision, it becomes really annoying, and filing in general is just super inconvenient, so don't copy me. On to note-taking. So first thing I do is to draw a margin if my page doesn't already have one. This is great for adding extra tidbits in revision, or for subheadings, or for any extra notes that don't fit into your main body of text. Or you could use them just for smaller summaries. Margins are essentially useful for heaps of things, so whatever you think of, pop in there. You don't have to draw on a margin, but it really helps. For some subjects, or topics of certain subjects should I say, I don't actually use a margin, but as a general guide, I do majority of the time use a margin. Next thing I do is write the title, which is kind of obvious, I would think. I've put a link up here and also in the description if you want to learn how to take great aesthetic titles. If your notes are for a class, I recommend you write the main topic as the title, and the lecture number or class number and name at the side of the page, or in small lettering on top. This really helps with reading notes later. If a heading said Lecture 5 Physics, for example, without reading the contents of the page, you probably would have zero idea what the notes are about, and you had to read the page to find out. So it's kind of faster if you just wrote a topic, for example, magnetic fields, and you'd know straight away, Lecture 5 was about magnetic fields. And if the notes are for your textbook, I would recommend keeping the heading or title the same as the chapter or subtopic name. This will come in handy later for sure. Of course, keep in mind that this again is flexible as with most things in note-taking, so if you're just say reading an English book and taking notes in that, you may not necessarily want to head in your notes, chapter 2. Okay, so after the title, I write any key definitions down. A good tip is to somewhat reword textbook definitions. This helps you to memorize definitions and also to revise something you understand. For example, if the textbook says atoms and then the definition is the building blocks of matter, you could instead reword it to something you understand. For example, the basics of matter, or what all matter is made of. Okay, to be honest, those weren't the greatest examples, but I'm sure you get the point. So moving on, I then write any examples or explanations using a dot point system. Shown here is the one I use, but you can definitely come up with anything that works for you. Just try to use the same system across subjects, or it can get confusing later. Also, make sure you read through the whole text carefully and write any other key phrases that feel important or you think you may forget. Just write them down. For class notes, you should focus not so much on definitions, as that will be in the textbook, but rather on additional diagrams your teacher has shown, or things they talk about that relate to exams, or is not in the textbook. Additionally, even if a lecturer or teacher covers a topic in the textbook in class, I would still recommend reading through that same topic in your textbook and writing down anything that was not covered. Another thing to do is to draw diagrams. It isn't about making the prettiest diagrams, although you can certainly make diagrams look great, but diagrams are rather for information to take a visual form, or to just show things and take up less space. This is again good for revision and helps learning. On top of this, you can think of creative ways to present written information visually. There are lots of ways to do this, so have a think. I use clouds and text boxes throughout my notes to make certain information stand out. An example is a formula explanation, or the working of a specific problem, or basically anything else. I also highlight keywords throughout my notes, as well as any formulas so they stand out. It's important not to over-highlight, so don't highlight lines and lines of text. Instead, highlight key phrases within text. I also use abbreviations to help shorten how much I have to write. So I use like an E- for electrons, or a P+ for protons, or info for information. Your abbreviations don't necessarily have to be scientifically accurate as long as you understand them. I know a lot of people have like somewhere where they write what their abbreviations mean. Personally, I don't. I'm not saying I don't recommend it, but I know what abbreviations I use and exactly what they mean. If you think you'll forget, then write it down. With formulas, I recommend writing what each variable means and also the unit it is measured in, if it's measured in one. So don't just write F equals ma, for example, for force. Explain that force is measured in newtons, mass is measured in kilograms, and acceleration is measured in meters per second squared, for example. Also, maybe include an example question. It is really amazing how easy it is to forget what a set variable means in a formula or the unit of its measurement. Here you can also add like unit conversion factors and the standard SI unit for formula variables. Another thing to do is to add subheadings throughout your notes. This is a great way to sector your notes into sections and make it easier to digest later. Lastly, while you are taking notes, it can be a good idea to write on a sticky note. Write on a sticky note questions about the topic and just stick it on the page. This is great to test knowledge for exams with active recall and revision. Okay, so that's it for this video on how to take notes. I really hope this was helpful with your note taking, and if you like tips on how to make your notes more aesthetic, then why don't you check out this video. Thank you for those of you who made it all the way through right to here, I really appreciate it. Why don't you throw a notebook emoji in the comments to show me that you made it this far? And if you have, why don't you subscribe and like this video so you can see more content like this. Happy note taking! Bye!